Ambassador Wu, thank you for this opportunity to share. Comrade Lindwe Zulu, it's good to see you as well. It's been a minute. And Dr. Tembe, congratulations for your book. Now, Forum for China-Africa Cooperation. As we head towards the summit, as we celebrate your book, we must be very clear as Africans as to what we want. What we want as Africans. We talk about win-win. What is the definition of the African win? What is it that we want as Africans? Secondly, what do we have to do to achieve that which we want? We want development in Africa. We want prosperity in Africa. Not just development of any kind, not just prosperity of any kind. We want inclusive development on the continent. We want shared prosperity on the continent. That's what we want. What do we have to do to achieve inclusive development and shared prosperity? Number one, we must have economic transformation on the continent where we move up the value chain through beneficiation and value addition. That's agenda number one. Agenda number two, infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Infrastructure is the economy. The economy is infrastructure. That's number two. Number three, we must build on the continent capable developmental states. For now, I'll concentrate on those three: economic transformation, infrastructure, and the building of capable developmental states on the continent. And in all these things, by the way, in defining what we want, in defining what we need to do, we can learn a lot from China. For example, when we say shared prosperity, when we say inclusive development, the Chinese have been able to move 800 million people out of poverty in 40 years. That's inclusive development. That's shared prosperity. Their GDP at $19 trillion is shared. What can we learn from that experience in China? Ambassador, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired of being exporters of raw materials. We don't want to export raw materials to China. We want to work with you on the continent to do value addition, produce cars on the continent, produce computers on the continent, produce value-added products on the continent for the African market and for export to China, export to Europe, export to the world. The African wants to move up the value chains. We don't want to sell raw copper, raw chrome, raw platinum, raw coal, raw diamonds to China. No, we are not interested in that. We want to work with Europe, with China, with anybody else to add value to our natural resources. That's what we need to do on the continent to achieve shared prosperity, to achieve inclusive development. Number two, we must make sure on the continent our governments are capable, our states are capable, our states are developmental states, just like your government, driving development, driving transformation. And of course, Comrade Lindwe Zulu, we need an ethical, capable state. No corruption, please. Ethical, capable states on the continent. Without ethical, capable states on the continent, we will not be able to achieve shared prosperity and inclusive development. More than developmental, the state must also be facilitative, allowing and enabling the private sector to create jobs, to drive economies. That state must also be entrepreneurial, meaning it must produce entrepreneurs, it must drive entrepreneurship. So Africans must make sure that in their countries they create ethical, capable developmental states which are also facilitative, which are also entrepreneurial. The last one, infrastructure. We learn from China. We need to build the roads. We need to build the railway systems. We need to build the dams. Without infrastructure, there cannot be any economic development of the continent. In particular, energy. We have energy poverty on the continent. Load shedding, Seju 100. This is why when we say energy transition, we are not going to listen to the global north and their prescription on us. We as Africans are going to do energy transition from fossil fuel to green on our terms, in our own time. Why? Why would you force me to abandon fossil fuels when I have energy poverty? When there are people in this country who have never seen an electric bulb, who have never experienced electricity. The African must transition from fossil fuels to green energy on our terms, the way we want it. Not the way Anglo-Sam wants it, or the way the global north wants it. Why? Because our problems are different. We on the continent have energy poverty. Our number one problem is solving energy poverty. Of course, it would be great to solve it using clean energy. But we are going to decide and determine our problems and our priorities as the global south, and not listen to the prescriptions from the global north to us. Infrastructure is the economy is infrastructure. Part of the success story of China is infrastructure. Look at the amount of power generated in China. Look at the railway systems. Look at the roads. Look at the dams. We as Africans, in our pursuit of shared prosperity, must address the issue of infrastructure. More importantly, we must also think about infrastructure required for integration. In SADC, for us to work together, we must have integrative infrastructure. For us to work together in Africa, we must have integrative infrastructure that enables integration, including airwaves, aeroplanes. Right now, it's cheaper and easier to fly from Joburg to London than London Accra. Joburg to London, London Lagos. So the airway infrastructure must be developed so that we can integrate. And I want to conclude by emphasizing this, Ambassador. In all the things I've mentioned, we want to learn from China. In the definition of what we want, there are lessons from China. In understanding what we need to do, we learn from China. China is doing value addition. China is the manufacturing factory for the world. China has a capable, ethical, developmental state. We want that too. China has massive infrastructure. We want massive infrastructure. So as we talk about the forum on China and Africa cooperation, we must be very clear as Africans of the definition of our win, what we want, and what we need to do to achieve what we want. And of course, we conclude on numbers. South Africa won't make it in South Africa. You're too small, Minister Zulu. You are 60 million people. You are a GDP of $403 billion. That is chicken change. You must talk about 1.4 billion Africans. You must talk about a collective GDP of $2.5 trillion. That is the African economy. That is the economy that should be dealing with China. No bilateral deals, Ambassador. We don't want a bilateral deal between Botswana and South Africa. No, we are not interested. We don't want a bilateral deal between Zimbabwe and China. No, Ambassador, not interested. We don't want a bilateral deal between South Africa and... No, we are not interested. We want a deal between China and SADC. A deal between China and Africa. That's what we want. I thank you so very much.